I am a TCCS volunteer in Group 125 or 129, and I am 1 year into my 2 year Peace Corps service. I am serving in Sawang Arom in the province of Utai Thani. One highlight so far into my service would have to be just the comfortableness and the trust that has grown between my students and I. I imagine that when I first arrived, my students and my community as a whole didn't quite know what to make of me. They were expecting an American volunteer, and as far as they'd been taught up until that moment, an American was someone that had fair skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. And I very obviously don't fit that image. So I think initially it took a lot of work and patience on my part and for my students for us to get to a point where there was mutual trust. I remember in the beginning, my students would show apprehension and they would hesitate to try to get close to me. But now we're at a point where, whether we're at school or we're out and about in the community, I have my students and their family members coming up to me, giving me hugs and giving me kisses and wanting to hold my hand. Another highlight so far would have to be having had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with one of my counterparts about race and about being someone of darker skin, whether it's here in Thailand or back home in the United States. The way the conversation came about was my counterpart and I were witness to a conversation between two of our younger students. One of our students told a little girl that she wasn't beautiful because she had dark skin. My counterpart reacted by laughing, and I took that very personally, seeing as how I'm black, and had been committed, I still am committed to being here for 2 years. So I wasn't quite sure if the laughter was because my counterpart agreed with the statement or if maybe my counterpart was trying to make light of a situation that was very obviously emotionally charged and triggering. But during our conversation, it was important for me to stress for us, both of us, to I guess imagine being that 5, 6 year old little girl and being told you're not beautiful because your skin is dark. And then having to sit there and hear a teacher laugh as if he validates that statement. But I think by the end of our conversation, we were in agreement that as a team that we needed to work together throughout the remainder of my service here to teach our kids that they should love themselves as they are, and that the same respect and love that they should be showing to themselves, that they need to try to show to their peers and other people. I identify as black, I identify as African, and I identify as being African American. The reason that I identify as black and African first is because I was not born in America and I was not raised in America. I am originally from Southern Africa. So I did not start identifying myself as American or African American until I was in high school. In high school, around 2007, that was when I received my U.S. citizenship. My identity has impacted my service in a number of different ways. Some ways have been very obvious to me, and I'm sure that there are other ways in which it has impacted my service and my experience here that I'm yet to be aware of. But so far, I've had to constantly defend my identity as an American because I have dark skin. because as far as Thai nationals have been taught, and based on the information they have access to, an American is someone that doesn't look like me. The conversation becomes extremely hard even when people realize that as I identify myself as American, I was not born or raised there. So, with my limited Thai language ability, I feel like a lot of times when I'm trying to explain who I am and my makeup, a lot of my story gets lost in translation. I have shared diversity or my diversity or diversity in general with my community by just always having a willingness to have that conversation about the fact that there are different types of people that rightfully are able to identify themselves as American. Second, I've had opportunities to sit down with my community members or my teachers and students to actually show them pictures of my family and friends back home in America and my fellow Peace Corps volunteers here in Thailand, and so that they can get an actual visual of the diversity that we represent. I think it's been nice for them to be able to see that my black friends, my white friends, Asian Americans, Native Americans, as different as we seem from one another, we all have absolutely every right to represent and identify as Americans. Since my service started, I don't necessarily think it has changed the way I view myself, but I do think that having been here for this long has solidified for me the it has solidified for me how confidently and strongly I stand in my blackness. It has also stressed for me how important it is for me being from Africa to not forget where I come from and to not forget to realize how far I've come. Because I think it's quite a colorful story to be able to say or identify as Black, African, and African American. Um, my community has benefited from having me here because they're able to see and experience a more colorful reality of America. Um, I think a lot of times, not just in my community, but in Thailand as a whole, Thai people, their exposure to Americans is through tourists or people that are only here for a very short time. So, me having this opportunity to be here for so long, gradually people start to realize that just because I'm American, just because I'm black, it doesn't mean that we're that different from one another. I think, especially having had conversations with my counterparts, where they're surprised that in America we have yes, we have people that are wealthy, but majority of people are really not that well off. I think a lot of the information they receive about America and Americans is very romanticized. So me being here puts things into perspective. I think it teaches myself and my community that we share a lot of the same vulnerabilities as human beings. My approach to handling difficult challenges, it really depends on the challenge itself. But one thing I have been trying to do is to try not to be so reactive. I have been trying to step outside of myself to try to, I guess, evaluate the challenge or the situation to see if it's even worth it to have a reaction to it, because not everything that happens deserves a reaction. Another thing I do is to write. I love to write, and I've learned that anytime I write my feelings down, the situation becomes a lot more clear, and a lot of times the situation ends up being not as bad as I made it out to appear in my head, because I am without a doubt an overthinker. Another coping mechanism for me is exercise. I love having the freedom to be able to go for a run or go for a bike ride, and to kind of really find my center and rebalance myself to be able to think more clearly. My advice to current and future volunteers, I have two advice for everyone. Number one being, don't feel the need to compare your Peace Corps experience to that of other people. Peace Corps service or the Peace Corps experience, it differs based on country that you're serving in. It differs based on the project that you're working in. Even within the same country, it's gonna be different based on where your host community is. So whatever it is that you're doing in your community, whatever projects you're taking part in, whatever you're experiencing, it's just as valid, is just as important, and is just as necessary as whatever experience your friends may be having elsewhere. My second advice would be, in your everyday routine, try to always make room for self care and self love. I think we can all agree that being a Peace Corps volunteer is a very tough job. It takes a toll on all of us emotionally and mentally, and sometimes even physically. I think it's very important that we go out of our way to find time to take care of ourselves. So if you need to take a day to binge on Netflix, or you need to take a trip to the city, whatever it is that helps you rebalance yourself, rebalance your emotions or your energy, by all means, do not hesitate to take the opportunity to do so. If you're not 100% mentally and emotionally, it's going to become very hard for you to give 100% effort into your community, your projects, and your kids. I I'm not sure what's next for me really. I've been toying with a couple things. One thing that I've been considering is to join the United Nations volunteer services so that I can volunteer in conflict countries as an aid worker or peacekeeper. Another idea I have is to join the foreign service, but right now, with the way our politics is set up, I think it might be in my best interest to hold off until later on before joining the foreign service. Lastly, I've also considered going back to Phoenix, Arizona, and hopefully getting a job with the International Rescue Committee and working with refugees back in my home state of Arizona. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you. See you later.
Have you eaten yet?